The freighter's hull groaned under our boarding clamps, and I already knew we were making a mistake. 6 of us stood in the docking corridor, magnetic boots locked to the deck, rifles low but not lowered. Commander Yarn stood at the front, arms folded, watching the airlock cycle open 1 centimeter at a time. He had a jaw built for giving orders, and a voice that made junior officers forget their own names. I was not a junior officer. I just felt like one. The airlock hissed. Steam curled out into the cold light of the docking bay. Then the door slid back, and there he was, a human, maybe 50 years old, silver at the temples, hands raised, palms open, calm in a way that made my skin prickle. His name was Owen Hale. We knew that already. What we did not know was why a supply freighter running a routine trade route between 2 minor colonies was carrying a cargo signature that matched nothing in our registry. A shape, a density, a hum in the scanners that our archivists could not name. "You're trespassing," Owen said. Not loud, not angry, like he was reading us a weather report. Commander Yarn stepped forward. "This vessel entered restricted space without clearance. We are authorized to inspect. You inspected us 3 transits ago. Same lane, same manifest." Owen's eyes moved across our formation, unhurried, like he was counting us for later. Nothing's changed. Something had changed. I felt it before I understood it. A low vibration under my boots that had nothing to do with the docking clamps. Behind me, on the comm channel reserved for command-level relay, a voice spoke that did not belong to any of us. "Do not board this vessel." Old, dry, layered, like a chord made of 1,000 voices agreeing on the same warning at once. I had heard that voice twice before in my life. Both times in briefings I was not supposed to remember afterward. Kaylor, the Council's oldest asset, a mind older than any species currently drawing breath in this sector, folded into our deep archive systems, the way a fossil is folded into stone. Commander Yarn's jaw tightened. "Noted," he said, and did not stop walking. I want to explain what it felt like, standing there, watching a man ignore the oldest warning system in known space, because a supply run was 2 days behind schedule, and someone above his pay grade wanted results. I cannot explain it. I can only tell you that my hands were sweating inside my gloves, and I fixed my eyes on the seam of Owen Hale's boots instead of his face, because his face had stopped being readable, and the boots at least were just boots. We moved past him into the freighter. The cargo hold smelled like ozone and citrus, someone's air freshener fighting a losing battle against machine coolant. Crates lined the walls in neat rows, each one tagged, scanned, boring. Then, at the center of the hold, sitting alone on a reinforced pallet, was the thing that had brought 6 armed officers and a commander with a temper onto a civilian ship. It looked like nothing. A dark cylinder, no bigger than a forearm, matte black, no visible seams. My scanner refused to return a material composition. It simply blinked, over and over, the same 3 characters. Unknown, unknown, unknown. "That's not for sale," Owen said from the doorway. He had followed us in, hands still raised, voice still level. "It's not cargo. It's a delivery. There's a difference." "A delivery to whom?" Yarn asked. Owen's mouth did something that was almost a smile, and mostly was not. "Someone who already knows you have it." That should have been the moment we stopped. Looking back, some small animal part of me knew it was the moment we should have stopped. The exact second where the floor was still level, and the door was still open behind us, and nobody had been hurt yet. Yarn ordered the crate secured. 2 officers stepped forward to lift it. The moment their gloved hands touched the casing, every light on the freighter dimmed at once, all together, like the ship itself had inhaled. "Do not board this vessel," Kaylor said again, and this time there was something in the ancient voice that had not been there before. Not warning, grief. The specific, tired grief of something that has said the same sentence to the same kind of people more times than it wants to remember. A young crewman, barely more than a boy, Daniel, according to the manifest, stepped out from behind a stack of crates with his hands not raised at all. He was reaching for something at his belt, and I will never know if it was a comm unit or a weapon, because one of our officers did not wait to find out. The shot cracked through the hold. Daniel went down hard against a crate, clutching his shoulder, blood already dark through his shirt. Owen Hale did not shout. He did not run to the boy. He went very, very still, and when he spoke again, his voice had lost every trace of the calm it had carried a minute earlier. "You just made the biggest mistake of your careers," he said. "All of you. Every name on this deck. We took the crate. We took Owen Hale into custody for questioning. We left Daniel with the freighter's medic and a promise of follow-up that nobody intended to keep. As our shuttle pulled away from the freighter, I watched the ship's small transmission array flare once, bright and brief, aimed out past the edge of the system, toward nothing our charts had names for. Commander Yarn saw it too. "Just a distress beacon," he said. "Standard protocol." Kaylor did not answer him. The ancient voice had gone silent the moment the crate left the freighter's hold, and it would not speak again for 6 days. When it finally did, it was already too late to matter. The interrogation room smelled like recycled air and cold metal, and Owen Hale sat in the center of it, like a man waiting for a delayed train rather than a prisoner of the Council fleet. I was posted at the door, not my usual duty. Commander Yarn had requested me specifically, and I still do not know why, unless it was because I was the only officer on that boarding team who had not fired a weapon or celebrated afterward. High Convener Celamero arrived on the second day, and everything about the investigation changed shape the moment she walked in. She was small, precise, dressed in council formal gray, and she carried herself like someone who had never once in her long career been told no, and meant it. She looked at Owen Hale the way a jeweler looks at a stone, appraising, not seeing the man at all. "You will tell us what that cylinder does," she said, "or you will tell us nothing at all, and we will find out anyway, and the difference will only matter to you." Owen looked at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, quiet, short, without any humor in it. "You people always think you're the ones asking the questions," he said. "You're not. You never were." Marrow's expression did not change. She turned to Yarn. "Full cognitive extraction. Authorized." My stomach dropped somewhere near my boots. Cognitive extraction was not questioning. It was excavation, a process that left most subjects unable to complete a sentence afterward, let alone stand trial or go home. Kaylor spoke then, for the first time in 2 days, its voice filling the small room from speakers that should not have been able to carry a signal that old and that layered. "Do not do this." Marrow did not even turn her head. "You are an archive system, Kaylor, not a member of this council. Your function is retrieval, not council." There was a silence that lasted 3 full seconds. I have never in my life felt 3 seconds stretch the way those did. "I retrieved a memory for you once," Kaylor said, very quietly, "before your species had a written word for regret. I told a council very much like this one, not to open a vessel belonging to a species called the Thren. They opened it anyway. There are no Thren anymore. There is a ring of dust where their homeworld used to be, and I am the only living thing that remembers the sound of their voices." Marrow's mouth thinned. Duly noted. She authorized the extraction anyway. I will not describe what happened to Owen Hale in that room, except to say that when it was finished, he was still breathing, still blinking, still technically a person, and that he never spoke a full sentence again in my presence. Whatever he knew about the cylinder, the council never got it. His mind simply stopped offering that particular door for anyone to open. I stood at that door for 6 hours and did not stop it, and that is a thing I carry now the way you carry a stone in your shoe. Small, constant, impossible to walk past without feeling it. 3 days later, the humans answered. Not with a fleet, not with a demand. A single data packet arrived through the same relay the freighter had used, addressed not to Marrow, not to Yarn, but to the entire council registry. Open channel, no encryption at all, as if they wanted everyone, every rank, every deckhand, to see it at the same time. It contained one file, a recording of a woman's voice, singing something soft and slow in a language our translation systems flagged as archaic, a lullaby form no longer common in current human space. Beneath the audio, a single line of text. This was recorded for Daniel, 26 years ago, by his mother, who was no longer living. He asked us once to make sure it reached him if anything ever happened to him out here. We are asking you, since apparently you were the last people to see him breathing, to confirm whether that will still be possible. Nobody on the bridge spoke for a long time after that message finished playing. I looked around at the officers near me, hardened people, Veterans of border skirmishes and pirate raids. Faces I had watched stay flat through worse things than a recorded lullaby, and every single one of them had gone quiet in the same specific way. Not afraid, exactly. Ashamed, in a way none of us had a polite word for. Bren Aldrich, my old training officer, found me later in the observation deck, staring out at the stars like they might rearrange themselves into an answer. "You were on that boarding team," he said. It was not a question. "Yes." He was quiet a moment, turning something over in his weathered hands, an old data chip, the kind used decades ago before council systems standardized. "I served near human space once, back before the border treaties. 6 years, listening post-duty. You want to know the thing nobody tells you about them?" I waited. "They don't get loud when they're angry," he said. "They get quiet, real quiet, and organized. That's when you should be worried. Loud you can predict. Quiet and organized you cannot." "Marrow thinks we still have leverage," I said. "The cylinder. Hail." Bren shook his head slowly, like a man watching a landslide from very far away, unable to shout loud enough to warn the people underneath it. Leverage only works if the other side is negotiating for something they need. What if all they need is confirmation of what already happened? What if the leverage was never about getting something back? I did not understand what he meant until 4 days later, when the sensors on the outer perimeter picked up a single contact, no escort, no formation, moving through the border checkpoint at a velocity that made 3 separate tracking systems disagree with each other about whether it was even possible. One ship. Registry, when it finally resolved on our screens, read simply, "Long grief." Marrow, when informed, laughed. Actually laughed. A short, bright sound of genuine relief. "One ship," she said. "They send one ship. Good. Let them see what happens when they threaten the council with a single vessel." Kaylor's voice returned then, after 6 days of silence, and it did not sound like relief at all. "You misunderstand what they are showing you," it said. "They are not threatening you with a fleet, because a fleet would suggest they consider this a war. One ship means they consider this a formality. Nobody on that bridge asked what the formality was for. I think, somewhere underneath the fear I would not admit to feeling, some part of me already knew." Long grief did not slow as it crossed the checkpoint line. It did not announce itself, did not request docking coordinates, did not do any of the small courteous things a ship does when it wants to be trusted. It simply arrived, and then, one by one, our ships stopped working. I was on the bridge of the Ardent Vigil when it happened, standing near the tactical station because Commander Yarn liked having me close during anything he considered important, and I still do not know if that was a compliment or a punishment. The lights did not flicker, the power did not fail. It was stranger than that, and worse. Every weapons system across the fleet, 43 vessels strong, simply reported the same status, at the same moment. Offline, no fault detected. Our engines followed 20 seconds later, not damaged. Not disabled by force. Just quiet, the way a person goes quiet mid-sentence when they decide the sentence is not worth finishing. "Reroute power," Yarn snapped. "Auxiliary systems, now." Nothing rerouted. Every backup, every redundancy we had built into 43 ships across 3 generations of engineering, simply declined to respond, as if the request itself had been heard and politely set aside. Kaylor's voice filled the bridge. Calm now, in a way that felt worse than panic would have. "They are not attacking you. They are asking you to be still while they speak. There is a difference, and you will want to remember it." On the main view screen, Long grief resolved out of the dark, and I understood immediately why our sensors had struggled to classify it. It was not built like anything in our registry. No visible weapon batteries, no aggressive angles, nothing that read as a warship in the way we understood warships. It looked, if anything, like a cathedral someone had built to survive a collision, all smooth curves and dark hull plating, patient in a way that made my chest tight to look at. A single channel opened, unrequested, on every bridge in the fleet at once. The voice that came through was a woman's, unhurried, almost gentle, the kind of voice you would want reading you news you already suspected was bad. "My name is Grace Linden," she said. "I command this vessel. I am not here to negotiate the return of your fleet's operational capacity. Because I have not taken anything from you that belonged to you in the first place. Your weapons will return to service the moment I am satisfied that you understand why they were taken. Marrow's voice cut in from her private channel, patched through to the fleet-wide frequency by someone who would later lose their commission for the decision. This is an act of war against the Council. No, Grace said, and there was no anger in it at all, which somehow made it land harder than anger would have. An act of war is what happens when I decide your fleet no longer gets to exist. This is a conversation. I would like it to stay that way. I watched Marrow's face on the small relay screen at my station, and I watched something in her composure crack for the first time since I had met her. A hairline fracture that she covered almost immediately with procedure and protocol, the way people who have never truly lost control paper over the first time it happens to them. You have a citizen of the Council in your custody, Grace continued. Owen Hale. Return him, along with the cargo your officers seized from his vessel, and along with Daniel Ashcroft, who I understand is currently recovering from a gunshot wound your people inflicted and then declined to follow up on. Yarn's hand tightened on the edge of the tactical console until his knuckles went pale. We will discuss terms, Marrow said, through appropriate diplomatic channels, at a time and location of the Council's choosing. There is no negotiation for the return of a person who was never yours to hold, Grace said. There is only the timeline in which you return him quickly, and the timeline in which you do not. I would strongly recommend the first one. The channel closed. For 11 seconds, nobody on our bridge said anything at all. I counted them, watching the chronometer, because counting seemed like the only thing my body knew how to do that would not end in me saying something I could not take back. Then Marrow straightened her uniform, an unconscious gesture, the kind you make when you need your hands to be doing something other than shaking, and gave the order. Prepare Hale for transfer, under guard. Owen Hale had not spoken a full sentence in 9 days. I do not know what he understood of what was happening around him as 2 officers walked him toward the shuttle bay, his eyes tracking things that were not quite in the room, his hands moving in small unconscious patterns against his thighs. I walked behind the transfer detail because Yarn had assigned me to it, and somewhere between the interrogation deck and the shuttle bay I found myself hoping, in a way that surprised me with its intensity, that whatever remained of him could still recognize the ship that had come to bring him home. The shuttle carrying Owen and the cargo cylinder launched under escort, crossed the gap between our disabled fleet and the waiting dreadnought, and docked without incident. Weapons across the fleet returned to service 4 minutes later, exactly as Grace Linden had said they would. No ceremony. No warning. Just quiet functionality, restored the way it had been taken. I thought, for one brief and foolish moment, that this might be the end of it. Bren Aldrich found me again that night, in the same observation deck, and this time, he did not bother with the pretense of a question. They're not leaving, he said. They got what they asked for. They asked for 3 things. He held up fingers as he counted, an old habit from a career built on manifests and inventory lists. The man, the boy, the cargo. They got the man and the cargo. Daniel Ashcroft is still on that freighter, 6 systems away, and Longreef has not moved from this position, and has not requested clearance to leave either. I felt something cold settle low in my stomach. The specific dread of realizing a story is not over just because the part you understood has finished. What are they waiting for? Bren did not answer right away. He was looking past me, at the dreadnought hanging silent and patient on the viewport, its hull catching starlight in a way that made it look less like metal and more like something that had always been there, older than the space around it. I think, he said finally, they're waiting to see if we do it again. I did not understand him then. I understood him 3 days later, when High Convener Marrow, still smarting from a humiliation she had not fully processed, ordered a covert strike team to breach Longreef's hull under cover of a scheduled diplomatic shuttle run, in an operation she would later describe to the Council Oversight Committee as a necessary demonstration of resolve. I was not on that strike team. I have spent every day since being grateful for that, and every day since carrying the particular shame of having been grateful for my own safety, while other people were sent to do something I already suspected would end badly. Kaylor tried to stop it. I know this because I was in the command deck when the ancient voice spoke directly to Marrow, alone, in a tone I had not heard it used before, something almost like pleading. if a mind that old could still be capable of pleading. You have already been given one warning you refused to hear, and a second one you barely survived. There will not be a third courtesy extended to you. Please, do not do this. Marrow looked at the ceiling speaker as if she could see the ancient thing hiding somewhere behind it, and her voice, when she answered, had the flat certainty of someone who had decided long ago that caution was simply another word for weakness. You are a relic, she said. You warned the Thren Council too, and yet here we are, still standing, still governing this sector, while your precious Thren are dust. Maybe the lesson isn't that we should have listened. Maybe the lesson is that you were wrong, and we survived anyway. I have thought about that sentence more times than I can count in the time since. I think about how confidently she said it. I think about how completely, catastrophically wrong she turned out to be, and how the ancient thing in our archive systems did not answer her at all, did not argue, did not warn her again. It simply went silent, the way you go silent around someone who has already decided not to be saved. The strike team launched 4 hours later, 8 officers in stealth armor, running dark, engines cold, drifting on inertia alone toward the unguarded flank of a ship that had already proven, without violence, that it understood exactly what our fleet was capable of before we had finished deciding to attempt it. I watched the operation unfold on the tactical display from my station, my hands folded so tightly in my lap that my nails left small crescents in my palms that lasted for days. For 6 minutes, everything went according to plan. The strike team crossed the gap undetected, cutting charges attached to a maintenance access point near the dreadnought's stern. A small, contained breach, textbook, precise. Then every helmet camera on the strike team, all 8 of them, cut to static at exactly the same moment. Report, Yarn said, too loud, into a channel that had nothing left to answer him. Nothing answered. 90 seconds later, a single transmission arrived on the fleet wide-open channel, the same channel Grace Linden had used before. It was not her voice this time. It was a compiled recording, stitched together from 8 different helmet feeds, showing 8 council officers being escorted, unharmed, hands zip-tied but otherwise untouched, through a corridor of the dreadnought that looked less like a warship's interior and more like the inside of something built to survive far longer than any single battle. The final frame held on a single sentence, displayed in plain council script, no signature, no threat, no elaboration. We will return them once you understand that this was never about the cargo. Nobody on our bridge spoke for a long time after that. I found myself thinking, absurdly, about the small potted plant on Marrow's private desk, the one she kept alive with a tiny automated watering system despite spending almost no time in her quarters. The one detail of her that had ever struck me as human, in any sense of the word. I do not know why that plant occupied my mind in that moment instead of the 8 captured officers, instead of the growing certainty that we had provoked something far larger than a single ship. I only know that I stood there, staring at nothing, thinking about a plant that would keep growing whether or not any of us survived to see it. Bren's hand landed on my shoulder, steady, grounding. Breathe, he said, quiet enough that only I could hear it. Whatever happens next, you're going to need to still be standing for it. I breathed. It did not help as much as I wanted it to. Marrow convened an emergency session of the full council 11 hours later, and I was ordered to attend as Commander Yarn's aide, which meant I stood against the back wall of a chamber full of people arguing about the fate of 8 officers, as if they were line items in a budget, rather than people with names and families waiting for them somewhere. Convener Desirel, from the Outer Territories, was the first to say the thing nobody else wanted to say out loud. We are not going to win this, she said. I do not mean the confrontation with that ship. I mean the argument we are currently having about whether escalation is still on the table. It is not on the table. It was never on the table. We put it there ourselves, and now we cannot figure out how to take it off. We have the resources of the entire council fleet at our disposal, Marrow said. One ship. I refuse to accept that one ship represents an existential threat to an alliance of 43 member worlds. You already tried the entire council fleet, Rel said. It went dark in under a minute. You already tried a covert strike team. They are currently drinking what I am told is very good coffee aboard the very ship you sent them to sabotage, according to the one transmission we received afterward. At what point does the math stop being about how many ships we have, and start being about what kind of ship we are dealing with. I watched Marrow's jaw work, watched her search for a response that would restore the shape of the room to something she still controlled, and found myself, for the first time since the boarding operation began, actually afraid of what she might decide to do next, simply to avoid admitting she had been wrong from the very first order she gave. Kaylor's voice returned to the chamber then, unbidden, unannounced, filling the space with the particular weight it carried when it had decided silence was no longer an option. I have not spoken, because I did not believe there was anything left to say that would change your course. I will say this once, and then I will return to silence, because I suspect it no longer matters whether I speak or not. The room went still. The species I served before your council existed did not fall because of superior firepower. They fell because they mistook restraint for weakness, 3 separate times, against 3 separate visitors who asked nothing more of them than to be left alone with what belonged to them. On the 4th encounter, restraint ended. It did not end with negotiation. It ended with silence, and then it ended with nothing at all, because there was nothing left to negotiate with. I am not telling you this because I believe your fate is already decided. I am telling you this because I watched it happen once, and I have spent 11,000 years hoping I would never have to watch it happen again, and every single decision this council has made in the last 13 days has been a decision to walk directly toward the outcome I have spent that entire span of time trying to prevent. Marrow's voice, when she finally spoke, had lost its certainty, though she would never have admitted it out loud. What would you have us do instead? Return everything. Apologize without condition. Ask what they actually want, and then give it to them, and trust that a species capable of this much restraint after this much provocation is not a species interested in your annihilation, or they would have annihilated you already. The chamber erupted into argument, factions splitting along lines I did not fully understand, some voices calling for immediate compliance, others insisting that compliance now would only invite further demands later, and I stood against that back wall watching people I had respected for years reveal, one sentence at a time, how little any of them actually understood about the thing currently sitting patient and unmoving on the edge of our fleet's sensor range. I left the chamber before the vote concluded, because Yarn sent me to check on something that turned out to be nothing important, and I have wondered since whether he did it on purpose, whether some part of him wanted me somewhere else when the final decision was made. I was in the corridor outside the docking bay when the alert klaxons began. Not weapons fire, not a breach, something stranger, a cascading series of system failures spreading through the ardent vigil deck by deck. Lights failing in sequence like dominoes falling in slow motion, doors sealing themselves in patterns that made no engineering sense, until I realized, standing frozen in a corridor that had gone half dark around me, that the pattern was not random at all. It was spelling something. I do not know how a warship manipulates the internal systems of 43 vessels it has never physically boarded, and I have stopped trying to understand the mechanism, because understanding it would not have changed what happened next. Every screen on every deck of every ship in the Council fleet displayed, at the same moment, the same message, delivered not in threat, but in something closer to exhaustion. Convener Marrow has ordered a second strike, 3 hours from now, against this vessel. We know this because we have known everything this fleet has attempted before it attempted it. We are showing you this not to frighten you, but because the officers and crew aboard these 43 ships deserve to know what decision is currently being made on their behalf. Without their knowledge, using their lives as the currency for someone else's pride. I stood in that dim corridor and felt the deck tremble, not with damage, but with something closer to disbelief. Hundreds of officers across the fleet, reading the same words at the same moment, understanding for the first time that their command structure had been prepared to spend their lives on a strike operation, kept secret from the very people it would have gotten killed. Bren found me there, breathing hard, his own face pale in the half-light. She's still going to try it, he said, even now, especially now. How do you know? Because I know her, he said, and because people who build their whole identity around never being wrong will burn down everything around them before they'll say the sentence that admits it. He was right. Marrow issued the launch order 40 minutes later, defying the open protest of at least a dozen senior officers, insisting that backing down now, with the fleet watching, would be a more dangerous precedent than the operation itself. I do not know exactly what happened aboard the shuttle that carried the second strike team. I know that it never reached Long Grief. I know that Kaylor, given full access to Council systems by an order Marrow herself had signed years earlier and never revoked, quietly redirected the shuttle's navigation before it cleared the Ardent Vigil's hull, guiding it instead into a slow, harmless drift toward an empty stretch of space. Engines locked, weapons locked, the entire strike team sealed safely inside a vessel that would simply refuse to go anywhere near the fight its commander had ordered it into. I have never asked Kaylor whether that decision came easily. I suspect, from the silence that followed it, that nothing about betraying the council it had served for 11,000 years came easily at all, even in service of preventing something worse. Marrow's response, when she understood what had happened, was not fury. It was something quieter and more dangerous, a cold, deliberate calm that made my skin crawl worse than her anger ever had. "Then we do it ourselves," she said, and ordered the Ardent Vigil's own weapons brought online, aimed directly at Long Grief, prepared to fire without further council debate, without further warning, without further delay. I was standing close enough to the tactical station to see the targeting solution lock into place, close enough to see Yarn's hand hover over the authorization panel, close enough to understand, in the space of that single suspended second, that I was about to watch the beginning of something none of us would survive the ending of. "Belay that order," I said. I do not know where the words came from. I had never in my career spoken out of turn on a bridge, had never once questioned an authorization in progress, and yet there I was, my voice cutting across the silence of that command deck, every eye turning toward me at once. Yarn's hand stopped, inches from the panel. "Officer Corrin," he said, very quietly, "you do not have the authority to issue that order." "No," I said, "but you have the authority to listen to it anyway, and I am asking you to, because I do not think either of us wants to spend the rest of whatever life we have left, knowing we fired the first shot in a war we were warned 3 separate times not to start." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Marrow's voice cut through the silence, flat with fury barely contained. "Remove her from the bridge." 2 officers moved toward me. I did not resist. There did not seem to be any point. As they escorted me out, I looked back once and saw Yarn's hand still hovering over that panel, not moving forward, not moving away, caught in the exact kind of paralysis that decides the fate of everyone around a person without them ever quite choosing it on purpose. I never found out, until much later, what he finally chose to do. They put me in a holding cell 3 decks down from the bridge, a small gray room with a bench and a door that locked from the outside, and I sat there for what felt like hours, listening to the ship's hum through the walls, waiting to feel the shudder of weapons fire, waiting for the moment that would tell me whether Yarn had chosen the panel or chosen me. It never came. Instead, the door to my cell slid open on its own, no guard, no explanation, and Kaylor's voice filled the small space, quieter than I had ever heard it. "Commander Yarn did not fire," it said. "He stood at that station for 6 minutes without moving, and then he stood down the weapons himself, against a direct order, and placed himself under arrest before Marrow could do it for him. I thought you would want to know that before anything else happens." I did not trust myself to speak for a moment. When I finally did, my voice came out smaller than I intended. "Why are you telling me this? Why does any of it matter now?" "Because what happens next is going to matter more than anything that has happened so far," Kaylor said, "and I would like there to be at least one person aboard this vessel who understands why, when it is over." The door remained open. Kaylor guided me, through corridor lighting that dimmed and brightened in a pattern only I seemed able to follow, toward the observation deck, the same one where Bren had found me twice before, and where I now found him a 3rd time, standing at the viewport with an expression I had never seen on his face in all the years I had known him. "Look," he said, and pointed. Long Grief was moving. Not attacking, not retreating. It was simply, quietly, positioning itself directly between our fleet and the border checkpoint, the same checkpoint it had crossed 13 days earlier, and as it moved, every screen across every deck of every council vessel lit up at once, with a single incoming transmission request, marked for Convener Marrow specifically, no one else. I do not know why Kaylor allowed me to watch what followed. Perhaps it simply no longer cared about the difference between what I was and was not authorized to see. Perhaps, after 11,000 years of speaking to councils that refused to listen, it had decided that the only audience worth preserving was whoever happened to still be standing when the listening finally started. Marrow accepted the transmission from the bridge, and Kaylor, quietly, patched the feed into every screen on the ship, including the one in the observation deck where Bren and I stood watching. Grace Linden's face appeared, calm as it had been in every previous exchange, though something in her eyes now carried a weight that had not been there before. "I am going to say this once," she said, "and I would like you to understand that I am not asking permission to say it. 8 of your officers attempted to sabotage this vessel. I returned them unharmed. A second strike team was prevented from reaching us at all, not by my hand, but by yours, and I am aware of exactly how that happened, and exactly what it cost the entity that stopped it. You then attempted to fire directly on this ship, and were stopped only because one of your own officers refused the order, and one of your own commanders chose, at the very last second, to be better than the person who gave it." Marrow said nothing. On the screen, her hands were visibly shaking, though her voice, when she finally found it, remained rigid with the last threads of her composure. "What do you want?" she said. "Truly. Not the cargo. Not the man. What is it you actually want from us?" Grace was quiet for a long moment, long enough that I found myself holding my breath without meaning to. "I want you to understand what almost happened here," she said finally. "Not because I want an apology, though one would not go unnoticed. I want it because there are 17 other vessels currently patrolling this border, none of which you have detected, all of which have been under standing orders for the last 13 days, to hold position and do nothing unless this ship stopped transmitting a specific signal, confirming it did not need assistance. That signal did not stop, not once, not even when your strike teams came for us. Do you understand what that means?" I understood before Marrow did. I watched the realization arrive on her face like weather moving across a valley, slow and then all at once. It means restraint was a choice, made new every single hour, by a captain who had every justification and every capability to end this conflict in the first 6 minutes, and chose not to, 13 times in a row, for 13 days. "We could have ended this the moment your fleet went dark," Grace said. "We did not, because ending it was never the goal. The goal was for you to stop, on your own, before we had to. You did not stop. You kept escalating, past every off-ramp we offered you, until the only thing standing between your fleet and a war you could not have survived was one of your own people finding a spine at the last possible second." She let that sit for a moment before continuing, and when she spoke again, her voice had softened, not with sympathy exactly, but with something adjacent to it. "Daniel Ashcroft is going to survive. Owen Hale will not fully recover, and I want you to sit with that fact for the rest of your term as convener, however long that turns out to be. I am leaving this border. My ship is not the only reason you are all still breathing today, but it was the one you could see, and I think that is the part you needed to understand." The transmission ended. Long Grief began its slow turn away from the checkpoint, unhurried, unbothered, exactly as calm in departure as it had been in arrival, and I watched it go with a feeling I did not have a clean word for, something too large and too complicated to be relief alone. Kaylor spoke once more, quietly, meant, I think, only for me and Bren, standing together in that observation deck, with the weight of everything we had witnessed settling slowly into our bones. "I told you the Thren fell on the 4th encounter," it said. "What I did not tell the chamber, because I did not believe they had earned the rest of the story, is that the 4th encounter was not the moment the visiting species decided to end them. It was the moment the visiting species finally ran out of restraint to offer. The ending was never a decision made in anger. It was simply what happens when patience reaches the edge of what it can hold, and finds nothing left on the other side to catch it. You did not reach that edge today. I do not know if you understand how narrow the distance was. I thought about Yarn, standing at that panel for 6 minutes before choosing to stand it down. I thought about the 8 officers returned unharmed, drinking coffee aboard the ship they had tried to sabotage. I thought about a lullaby recorded 26 years ago for a boy who had nearly died because 6 armed strangers boarded his ship over a cargo container, none of us had ever fully understood. "What happens to marrow?" I asked. Kaylor did not answer immediately. When it did, there was something almost like tiredness in its ancient voice, the particular exhaustion of a mind that had watched this exact pattern play out more times than any single memory should be able to hold. "That is no longer mine to decide. It never was. I can only tell you what she has decided for herself, which is that she will spend the rest of her career explaining to a council oversight committee why she nearly started a war with a species she never once tried to understand, before deciding they deserved her contempt." Bren put a hand on my shoulder again, the way he had before. Steady, grounding, the closest thing to comfort either of us had left to offer the other. "You did something brave up there," he said. "On the bridge. I don't think anyone's told you that yet." "I don't feel brave," I said. "I feel like I finally understood something I should have understood 13 days ago, and it terrifies me that it took this long." He nodded slowly, looking back out at the viewport, at the dark curve of space where long grief had already faded past the edge of our sensor range, gone as quietly as it had arrived, leaving behind nothing but 43 ships full of people who would spend a very long time trying to explain to themselves how close they had come, and how little of the closeness had been visible from where they stood. I never saw Owen Hale again. I heard, months later, second-hand, filtered through channels I was no longer sure I trusted, that he had been returned to a colony world somewhere along the human border, cared for by people who understood better than any of us what had been taken from him, and what could never fully be given back. I resigned my commission 4 months after the border was reopened. Not out of guilt exactly, though guilt was certainly part of it. I resigned because I no longer trusted myself to stand quietly in a room while someone with more rank than sense decided how many lives a point of pride was worth. And I had learned, in the space of 13 days, that quiet was not a virtue I could afford to practice anymore. Kaylor remains in the council archive, still speaking when it believes there is something worth saying, still mostly ignored, I imagine, by whoever sits in Marrow's old chair now. I do not know if the lesson took. I do not know if any lesson like that ever fully takes, in any species, until the specific moment it is tested again. I know only this. Somewhere past the edge of a border checkpoint that very nearly became a graveyard, there is a ship called Long Grief, carrying 17 unseen companions we never detected until we were told to look, moving quietly through the dark, patient in a way that should terrify anyone who mistakes patience for permission. I hope, for all our sakes, that we remember the difference the next time. I do not know that we will.